Hello and welcome to Return to Regalia, an Underland Chronicles reread podcast. I'm Una.
I'm John.
And today we'll be covering chapters 13 and 14 of The Marks of Secret, in which the Fireflies join the group and Luxa declares war. Where we left off, Photos Glowglow had just made his grand introduction.
The Fireflies. I feel like the Fireflies always kind of get lost in the scuffle when we talk about the beasts. Like, everyone talks about the rats, obviously, and the bats. And then in this book especially, we get a lot more about the nibblers.
Yeah.
And then we have the roaches, since Temp and Tick are there from the beginning. But the Fireflies, do they show up in the Code of Claw?
That's a good question.
Because they pop up in the second book.
Right.
The Prophecy of Bane. They come back here.
Yeah. I don't think they're in Code of Claw.
I don't think they are either. And if they are, it's like a very brief thing. Like, I don't think... They're definitely not on any part of the actual, like, big mission part of
I don't think that they do.
But
you're
here
right.
They are.
Yeah. Because I really love the Fireflies, but you're right that they're really not in the books a whole lot. They just have such a presence when they are in the books.
It's like, what are the snakes called?
The Twisters.
The Twisters. Like, the Twisters, that they had their moment. Now they're done. Now it's done.
Right.
Their time has ended.
And we don't even learn whether they're, like, sentient the same way that the other animals are.
Right. They could just be snakes.
Yeah, they could just be regular snakes.
But the Fireflies sure are sentient.
Yes. At the end of the last chapter that we read, I was just, like, going off about how much I love how dramatic the Fireflies are. Like, they're the theater kids of the Underland.
I mean, his name's Photos Glowglow.
Right? I was, like, getting sick of typing his full name in my notes, so I just abbreviated him to PGG.
PGG.
I might say that at some point, because it's just PGG in my notes. PG2.
PG.
PG squared? PG2.
PGG.
PGG. That's good. So yeah, let's get into it. Chapter 13 begins with Gregor exclaiming, "No way!" at the Fireflies. The narration reminds us of how the Fireflies deserted and betrayed the Questers on the Bane trip. Howard jumps up and draws his sword, yelling, "Show yourselves, you bloated bags of treachery!"
Yes.
Which feels very, like, Shakespearean insult to me.
Yeah.
Not just a bag of treachery, a bloated bag of
People
treachery.
don't use the word bloated enough.
Truly.
It should be brought back more.
Yeah, we should all make an effort to bring bloated back into our vocabulary. After a long pause, Zap says, "Well, that was rude," and Photos Glowglow agrees with her. Howard again calls for them to show themselves, but the Shiners insist that they're due some gratitude for how they helped out on the Bane quest. Nike takes Howard's side, but Luxa grabs his arm and whispers, "They have light." After thinking this over for a moment, Howard sheathes his sword. Luxa puts on a friendly voice and invites the Shiners to show themselves. Photos Glowglow says, "It seems more prudent to remain aloof," and when Zap tries to correct his word choice, he says, "I meant aloof, as in distant, remote, and detached." And I just have to share this story because there was this one time in my freshman English class in high school. I remember our teacher was reading from a book, I think. I don't even remember which one, probably like To Kill a Mockingbird or some shit. And my teacher read the word aloof, and he was like, "Does anyone know what that means?" And because I exist with Paul Bamer's audiobook narration rattling around in my skull at all times, I quoted with perfect accuracy, distant, remote, and detached. And my teacher was like, "That's good, where'd you learn that?" And I was just like, "Oh, I read it in a book."
You weren't going to share what book you read it from.
Yeah, exactly.
You didn't want to let that part of your flag fly.
Yeah. I was just like...
Picked it up somewhere.
Definitely not from some giant fireflies. But I was very proud of myself in that moment for knowing that word because of Gregor. Anyway, the Fireflies argue about their vocabulary until Luxa comments very smoothly on the amount of food they have, including cake. This gets the Shiners' attention, and Photos Glowglow asks, "Has this cake been frosted?" Luxa makes a show of taking a cake out of one of the picnic hampers and saying it would be a pity to waste. This convinces the Fireflies to turn on their lights. The narration says, Gregor knew Luxa absolutely loathed the Shiners. She also knew they could be of use. He had to admire how quickly she'd assessed the situation and made the decision to make peace with them. He thought Ripred would have applauded her shrewdness. It was something the big rat would have done himself. First of all, I love the Luxa Ripred parallels.
Yes.
We get a lot of them in this book. I feel like we get a lot of, like, good Luxa Ripred relationship development in this book. And I also just love what Gregor points out. Like, Luxa is very smart for very quickly assessing the situation and being like, oh, I fucking hate the Shiners, but, like, we need them. So I'm gonna pretend to be super nice.
Yeah.
I also love that Howard has so much rage against the Fireflies that he, like, can't at first recognize that they're useful. Like, his first instinct is to jump up and threaten them and, like, try and fight them. And Luxa has to be the rational one.
Yeah.
Which is kind of a role reversal for them.
Yeah, if this had happened in, like, the first book, I feel like Howard would have been trying to mediate things, and Luxa would have been like, no, let's take our chances in the darkness without him.
Right, exactly, yeah. And I feel like Luxa has learned so much about just, like, being nice to get what she wants, I guess. Like, she doesn't have to command people to do stuff.
The time in the jungle has changed too.
Right, exactly. Yeah, I love Howard's hatred of the Fireflies. Like, he just has this, like, major beef with them that never really goes away, and I admire that.
It's justified beef.
Yeah, truly. The Shiners gobble up the cake and make small talk with Luxa, whom they call Most Gracious Queen. The bugs end up explaining that they live in Hades Hall because they were chased out of their lands by Slimers. Howard tells Gregor that means snails, and Nike assures him that, no, underland snails are not faster than overland ones. Apparently, the Slimers can move about 1 yard per hour. Any guesses as to how many yards the average overland snail can move?
I was gonna say, even,
1 hour?
like, I'm sure they're bigger. That actually seems a bit slower than I'd expect.
Yeah.
Is it, like, they can use, like, move, like, I don't know, 5 yards an hour?
It's 52.8 yards per hour.
Per hour. Yeah, I was gonna say, a yard an hour is, like, boy.
Yeah, on average, I did the math, it's 52.8 yards. If I did the math wrong, you can correct me. I'm gonna be really sad, though.
I'd imagine it's more than 1 yard an hour.
Yeah.
That seems very, very low.
So actually, the underland snails are significantly slower than the overland ones.
Which makes the admission from Photos Glogo soon even more embarrassing.
Exactly. Even more hilarious. Howard says, it is widely believed that the snails did not even know they overthrew the Shiners, so non-existent was the resistance. Which I think is, like, really exquisite world building, because first of all, the snails just kind of, like, wandered into the Fireflies' lands with no intention of, like, ousting them or whatever, but, like, the Fireflies just left and consider themselves to have been, like, quote, chased out. And then the fact that everyone knows that this happened and doesn't care.
Yeah. There's a Doctor Who, like, alien species like that, where they were conquered so much that they, like, evolved to, like, have the need to be conquered. And so, like, if they don't get conquered, they, like, don't know what to do with themselves. They have to be subservient.
That's kind of fucked up.
It's very fucked up. It's very, very funny and darkly humorous.
Yeah, the Fireflies are just, like, so not about to fight the Slimers or even let them know that they don't want them there. They're just like, fine, I guess we'll leave.
And yet they're surprisingly confrontational with the group of people that they've been interacting with now.
Right. The Shiners get upset about what Howard said, and Luxa tells him and Nike to stop being rude because the Shiners know the area well and they do not. Howard says, I hope you know what you are doing, Your Highness. And Luxa basically tells him to go take a nap. I love that Howard calls her Your Highness, because he's kind of referencing, like, I hope you know what you're doing, because you're the queen, and I guess, like...
He's mad at her.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, he gets it, but he's still mad about it.
Yeah. He and Nike go off to grumble to each other, and Gregor thinks they would make good bonds. Which I think is cute, that... Like, I don't think that they ever actually become bonds, but it's cute that Gregor is kind of noticing, like, oh, they could be bonds.
He's trying to help both of them.
Yeah. He's like shipping them, but for bonds. The Shiners explain their perspective of the Bane trip, which is that the humans didn't hold up their end of the deal because they didn't provide the amount of food they promised to the Shiners. Gregor acknowledges that this kind of makes sense, but he still can't stand them. He points out that the Shiners could have just left without betraying them to the rats, and PGG claims that was Zap's idea. After the Shiners fight some more, Luxa asks them to join their group. The Shiners act like they're booked solid, but they can break some other commitments to fit Luxa in. It's a good tactic, you know, make them think that they're last on your list, but...
Play hard to get.
Yeah, exactly. Photos Glow mentions seeing rats down here, and Howard, who was just pretending to sleep, sits bolt upright to ask for details. The Fireflies end up telling the story of how they saw the Nars driving hundreds of Fount Nibblers past their lands, and apparently they heard that the Jungle Nibblers were taken straight to the Firelands. Throughout this conversation, the Shiners make comments about how tedious and annoying it is to watch the Nars drive the Nibblers places. I just think that that's interesting. It's not like Zap and Photos Glow have an opinion on, like, if what the Nars are doing to the Nibblers is wrong or right. They're just like, it's annoying and we don't want to see it. I feel like that is very accurate to how some people in our world react when they see tragedy.
They're so incredibly devoid of empathy that, like, they don't even have, like you said, they don't even have, they're not taking sides on it.
Right.
They're just observing and dismissing it in turn.
Yeah, they're like, this is so inconvenient for me. This is so upsetting to me that I have to witness this. Yeah. Zap again brings up how the Slimers drove the Fireflies out of their homes and no one came to help. When Luxa points out that no one knew the Fireflies were under attack, Photos Glow says it was because they were too proud to ask for help. Although Zap adds that no one wanted to make the long trip to Regalia anyway. The Shiners go to sleep, and Luxa stays up with Howard, trying to convince him to let the Shiners stay. In the morning, the kids are glad to see the Shiners, especially Boots, who asks, "Are you Fofo?" Photos Glow recites his iconic line, "I am he called Photos Glow, and will answer to no other name." Boots just says, "Temp, look, Fofo is here!" And Photos Glow replies, "I said, I am he called..." Oh, never mind. I love that he has these lines that he repeats, like the I am he called Photos Glow, like, first appeared in the Prophecy of Bane, and then he says it once more here, and then the third time he's gonna recite it, he's just, like, giving up. He's like, oh, never mind. The group takes off and soon passes by the Fireflies' land. Some of the Shiners demand to know what Photos Glow and Zap are doing, but no one flies out to meet them. The narration says, apparently Photos Glow and Zap were real go-getters for their species. And this kind of harkens back to, like, in book 2 when Marith says that Photos Glow and Zap aren't as bad as some other Shiners he's met. And it just makes you wonder, like, what could the other Fireflies possibly be like?
It's like in Supernatural when, like, they're talking about how the angels have no sense of humor. And then Castiel says, who's the one who dies? Who he says, like, oh, he's the funniest angel in heaven.
I think it was, like, Uriel or something.
Uriel is the funniest angel I've ever met.
Yeah. Yeah, it's exactly like that. The group travels so deep in the earth, Gregor's ears pop when he swallows. They have to stop a lot to fish for the Fireflies, and Gregor briefly wonders if the bugs are worth it, then remembers how helpless he was in the dark during the fight with Twirltongue.
Yeah, you've been neglecting your training.
Yep. The Shiners announce that they're nearing the bottom of the incline, but they don't want to make camp there because there's a bad smell coming from below. It reminds Gregor of the time his grandpa dragged a dead possum out from under a shed on the family farm in Virginia. The book says, something died down there, Gregor thought. A moment later, he saw them. At least 100 mice lay twisted and motionless at the bottom of the tunnel. And that's the end of the chapter.
That's a brutal cliffhanger.
Right?
A brutal end of that chapter, yeah. Like, we're in full-on genocide mode now.
Right, now it's becoming apparent what the Nars are planning for the mice. Yeah, and this is like the first of a lot of violence that we're gonna see on like a massive scale.
Yeah.
Yeah, this next part that kind of like describes the dead mice is just so gory and horrifying and like visceral. Chapter 14 starts with Boots asking if the mice are taking a nap, which is another little nod toward the prophecy that we're going to figure out later.
And also a reminder of how Gregor still hasn't really wanted to like start explaining death as much to Boots.
Right.
As others are saying he should.
Exactly, yeah. This is another moment when he's choosing not to engage with that. He's choosing to keep her in blissful ignorance about it. The Shiners turn off their lights so the kids can't see, and they pretend the smell is from a foul stream. Unfortunately, they can't shield Talia from the massacre, and when they land far away, she's shaking. Howard stays behind with the kids while Gregor and Luxa go back to the graveyard. Howard gives them cloths with antiseptic solution to use as masks against the smell, and he warns them not to touch the bodies. Gregor and Luxa find that the mice were driven straight over the side of a 40-foot tall cliff. The narration describes how gruesome the bodies look, and even when Zapp says, "What a waste. I do not pretend to like the Nibblers, but what a waste."
You know, it's bad when even they are showing sympathy.
Right. Yeah, even Zapp is like, oh, this sucks. I think that the phrasing, "what a waste," is interesting, though.
It's still not, like, expressing all that much, like, empathy with them. It's still more like, that's too bad.
Yeah. I'm interested in why Zapp chose this wording instead of, like, "what a tragedy," or something like that. Like, I wonder what exactly the waste is that she's referring to here. Like, is it just a waste of life? Is it a waste of... I don't even know. Yeah, I think it's interesting. Because the word waste in relation to the Nibblers seems to be invoking this sense of, like, value. Like, there's a waste in what has happened to the Nibblers. And I think that most likely Zapp just means a waste of life. But yeah, it's interesting. I'd be interested to hear what other people think about that wording.
Me too. It does feel like a very intentional choice of words.
Yeah, it always strikes me as odd, her wording there. I can't quite put my finger on why, though. Luxa knows the mice would have climbed down if they had the time, so it must have been the Nars who drove them off the cliff. Gregor asks if they should do something with the bodies, but Luxa points out they don't have the resources to do any proper burial. Gregor decides to scratch a few sentences in the stone with his sword, but he gives up after one straight line. I do love this instinct that Gregor has, that they ought to do something to mark the tragedy, and his first instinct is like, we should give them a burial, we should give them some kind of ceremony to recognize their deaths. And when Luxa is like, we don't have the fuel to burn them, we can't bury them, we can't put them in the river because that would pollute our drinking supply, he's like, well, we have to do something.
Yeah.
And I really think that that is such a Gregor thing to do, like this deep empathy that he has. I feel like this is very Katniss-like as well. This is like when in the Hunger Games, I guess Hunger Games spoilers, Rue dies and Katniss like covers her in flowers. She doesn't really have a good way of giving her like a burial, but she wants to send a message by making a ceremony out of her death. And I think that that's similar to Gregor's instinct here, is like he wants to mark this tragedy in some way so that people know what happened or something like that.
Yeah, even if it's like, if you look at it pragmatically, it may not be needed or even prudent to do so. Like, he still feels like he has to.
Yeah, he he wants to do something for them. Luxa adds a curved line to turn Gregor's scratch into the scythe, saying it'll be both a warning and a marker for the Nibblers' graves. The narration says, and then Luxa did something that made Gregor feel both remarkably close to and a million miles away from her. She flings away her makeshift mask, kneels on the ground, and puts her crown in front of her. She crosses her wrists with her palms down and recites, upon this crown my pledge I give, to my last breath I hold this choice. I will your unjust deaths avenge, all here who died without a voice. Gregor knows instinctively that it's not some random rhyme she came up with. It's a specific ritual, an oath, quote, something you swore to fulfill or died trying to. I really love this. Later we learn it's called The Vow to the Dead, because it's not a poem the same way that some of the prophecies are poem-like. It does rhyme, like choice and voice, but the meter is kind of awkward, I think. Like, well, actually, maybe it's iambic. Hold on.
I think the meter actually does work. It definitely reads more like an oath or a prayer than just like a rhyming.
Upon this crown my pledge I give, to my last breath I hold this
to my last breath I hold this choice.
I feel like that's kind of out of meter. And then, I will your unjust deaths avenge, all here who died without a voice. All here who died.
I feel like it's I don't know.
I feel like there's parts of it that don't match up with the meter, and it makes it a little awkward to read. But, like, maybe that's on purpose.
Mm-hmm. That is a pet peeve of mine when I have, like, when there's media that has, like, it's meant to rhyme, but, like, the rhyme scheme or the stresses are off.
Yeah.
There's a really famous Batman comic where it's meant to be, like, a nursery rhyme like that that's supposed to be creepy. And, like, it's written horribly, and it annoys me so much because they keep repeating it.
That's
like, this
hilarious.
doesn't work. This does not flow well.
That's funny that they were just like, it doesn't matter.
they were too busy building up other things to actually put in the effort to make the nursery rhyme good. I'm like,
sucks.
No,
because the prophecies some of them have meter. I think I'm gonna do an episode soon about the prophecies because I want to like analyze them like poems. So we know that Suzanne Collins can use meter. Mm-hmm. So I'm wondering what the deal is with this one. I drew this scene once in art class in high school. The prompt that our teacher gave us was like, draw a picture that's like a mystery, or draw a picture that makes you ask questions about what's happening. And so I didn't draw Luxa herself, I just drew her hands over the crown, and it made for a really good like piece of art. I was really proud of it.
Yeah.
I think it was just because I was listening to this audiobook in art class, because most of that class was just like, the teacher would be like, okay, draw this thing, and then the rest of the class would be us drawing, and we had 90-minute classes in high school.
Oh, yeah, the block periods.
Yes, exactly. So I got to just go through so many audiobooks, and one of them was Gregor, and the other was Percy Jackson. Like, I have a handful of books that I listened to during that art class that I have specific memories, like, tied to the art room because I was listening to the audiobook in that art room.
If you look back at the audio, like, oh, I know what Gregor book I was listening to right then.
That's pretty much it. Like, I'll look back at stuff and I'm like, oh, I remember I was listening to The Night Circus by Aaron Morgenstern or whatever at that time. Yeah.
That's Battle of the Labyrinth inspired.
Exactly. Yeah. Anyway, Luxa's clear agony makes Gregor want to comfort her, but he doesn't, because the oath, quote, reminded him that he was just a visitor in a strange land where people vowed vengeance and crowns mattered and queens were off limits to him. I like that.
Queens are off limits.
Yeah, I like that sentence. Oh, it goes on. Watching her rise, Gregor could no longer see Luxa, the 12-year-old girl who'd been searching for clues about her mouse friends. What he saw was the future head of Regalia and its considerable armies, and that the rats were somehow going to pay with their blood. I love this. That Gregor is like, oh, she's not just some kid. Like, she's gonna run Regalia, and she's gonna have immense power, and she's gonna be able to, like, wage war because she has control of the armies, and the rats are gonna pay for this because Luxa is pissed. I love that Gregor is just, like, realizing the full extent of her power, or the power that she will have when she becomes queen. And he's kind of, like, reminded how different their worlds are and how much he doesn't belong there. Yeah, I don't know. It's just great. Yeah. Gregor hears faint whispers in the tunnel, and later we'll learn that all the creatures in Hades Hall were watching Luxa's vow.
Mm-hmm.
And then, for some reason, Gregor doesn't understand. Luxa smiles, which is creepy.
Mm-hmm.
And it kind of parallels how earlier Luxa called Gregor out for smiling while he fought the jungle snakes.
Yep, when he was in his Veja moment.
Yeah. Like, I think that this is kind of a parallel to that scene, because in that scene when Gregor is fighting the Twisters, Luxa is kind of scared of him in that moment and scared of his power and the fact that he's smiling about the power that he has, and it's creepy. And then in this scene, Gregor is looking at Luxa and realizing her power for the first time, and Luxa is smiling because she knows that she just made this declaration and it's gonna be spread throughout the whole Underland, and she has immense power, but she's like smiling about it. And what she's really done here is like vowing vengeance on behalf of the Nibblers. She's basically like declaring war, and we're gonna get that at the end of this chapter. But the fact that she's smiling about that is like, she's not happy to be waging war, but she's smiling because she's satisfied with the amount of power that she has. Which is very interesting.
And she's completely content with this decision.
Yes.
She's like, this is what needs to happen, and I take no shame in starting it.
Right. She's like
trying to finish it.
Yes, this is what needed to happen, and later she's gonna get into a little fight with Howard and be like, I wouldn't take it back even if I could, because she's so sure that this is what needs to happen. One of the Nibblers makes a noise, and Luxa rushes over to stroke his fur, completely ignoring Howard's warning not to touch the bodies. They get the injured mouse onto Ares, and he and Gregor take him back to Howard. Luxa and Aurora stay behind to, quote, make sure no others still have light, and the book reminds us how light means life in the Underland. Luxa says Gregor and Ares don't have to come back to help, but they promise to return anyway. However, they don't find any other survivors among the bodies. Back at the campsite, Howard tends to the mouse, Cartesian. And I just, like, think it's really funny that this mouse is not named after René Descartes. He's specifically named after the math term for an XY coordinate plane.
Cartesian plane.
Yeah. So, like, it's not, like, the XY plane is named after Descartes, but Cartesian the mouse is not named after Descartes. He's named after the math term, which I think is really funny. I wonder if the mice know who René Descartes is.
I guess it wasn't like it was a unique surname.
But, like, did they read his philosophy? Like, he was a philosopher.
Yeah, I'm not sure how much algebraic advancement there's been in Regalia, also.
Yeah, I'd be interested to think about that some more. Have you read any Descartes?
Not that I can remember specifically. No.
I had to read him for the one philosophy class that I took in college.
I did not take that.
Intro to Philosophy. It was fine. He was fine.
That's. I feel like it's a lot of philosophy. I know I'm speaking from ignorance, but yeah, influential. But it's kind of, when you get to the root of it, for us, it seems old hat.
Yes, yeah. He's the guy who did the whole mind-body disconnect philosophy. He wasn't the most difficult to read in that class, but he also was not the most interesting, in my opinion.
Do you remember why they named the Cartesian plane after him?
He like, invented it.
Oh, he was also a mathematician?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, polymath, okay.
They said that someone else had also at that point, I, like, briefly read his Wikipedia, that like someone else had already kind of like put forth the idea of the XY plane, but like in a different form, and Rene Descartes is the one who like popularized it. But yeah, so he kind of came up with it.
Any ideas on why Suzanne Collins would have named the Nibbler after him, or is it just it was an old European name?
Well, all the mice have math names, right? So I think that Suzanne Collins was just like, I want to give all of the mice math names, and Cartesian is a badass name if you don't know that it is actually like from the Cartesian plane.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah. Compared to, like, I don't know. There's no mouse named Pythagoras or anything.
maybe, we don't know.
Well, we don't meet
we don't
mice
meet
named
them.
Pythagoras.
Because we meet other mice who have like stupid math names, in my opinion. Like
Quotient. We don't meet Quotient.
No, we meet a root.
Root, like a square root.
Yeah, like a square root.
So that's where it gets like that. Okay, I didn't even remember they were all named after math names, or math terms.
There's also a Newton and a Scalene, which I don't think are terrible, but Cartesian
is not as good as Cartesian.
Yeah,
Scalene
is a great name. Because I didn't know, when I was a kid, I didn't know that Cartesian was like a reference to anything.
You hadn't learned about a Cartesian plane.
No, and I certainly didn't know who Rene Descartes was. I just thought that Cartesian was like a fancy, old-fashioned sounding name.
Which it kind of is.
Yeah. It's a great name.
Who was the earlier mouse who we met that Luxa had been friends with? What was their name?
Boy.
Because, again, I forgot they were all math-related, but I can't remember what their name was.
It's on the tip of my brain.
Can I grab the book real quick?
Yeah, here. I can also just pull up my notes here. Oh, it's Heronian.
And see, I don't know. I mean, maybe I'm a bad math teacher. I don't know what that means.
It's a type of triangle.
Really? What does it mean? Like, what type of triangle is it?
In geometry, a Heronian triangle is a triangle whose side lengths, A, B, and C, and area, A, are all positive integers.
Is that not all how can you have a negative integer for an area?
I guess if it exists
on a Cartesian plane.
On a Cartesian plane in the negative parts?
I guess. Geometry, that's where I fell off of math. Math was like tied for my favorite subject throughout middle school, and once I got to geometry, I'm like, this is stupid. Now we're getting into just shapes and the abstract where it's not interesting.
If the three side lengths are setwise co-prime, meaning that the greatest common divisor of all three sides is one. I have not taken math since high school, which is damn near like 8 years ago now.
You're not missing all that much.
No, I could never. But this is another thing that, like, the mouse Heronian is named Heronian after the triangle, but the triangle is named after Heron of Alexandria. Right. So the mouse's name is not Heron after Heron of Alexandria. It's Heronian because she's named after the triangle, which is like so funny.
I wonder if Scalene is named after somebody too, or if it's just from like Latin or Greek, because it's also a type of triangle, but like doesn't give indication that it's from a name.
Now I'm doubting myself. I think Heronian might be the code breaker that they get later.
Yeah, Scalene is just Latin.
Sevian is the mouse that we found in chapter 7 or 6.
Sevian.
Sevian is the one who was like friends with Luxa and Aurora who died.
Okay, a Sevian is a line segment that connects a vertex of a triangle to a point on the opposite side of that triangle. Essentially, a line drawn from a corner of a triangle to the opposite side, named after an Italian mathematician, Giovanni Siva. So again, like it's like Cartesian.
Yeah,
except more obscure.
Heronian is the rat that they get for the code room in Code of Claw. Sevian is the
one who died earlier.
Lux's friend, yeah.
Marks of Secret. Bet you weren't expecting this tangent.
Yeah. Tangent, that's another math name.
God, yeah.
Let's move on.
It's just a Nibbler named Addition.
Because I am trying to put together a campaign.
Yes.
A D&D campaign.
I keep having it in my calendar, and I keep pushing it back as the weeks go on, because
oh my God.
I don't want to just delete it, but I also don't know when it's actually going to be.
I want to do it so bad, but DMing is so hard.
It takes so much time.
And I don't know really much about, like, homebrew D&D stuff. I just need to, like, put aside some time to work on it. But I was looking up math terms that I could use as, like, names for NPC nibblers. And I was like, ooh, that would be a good name. I'm forgetting now. I feel like Vector is a good name.
You're gonna get a lot of Despicable Me jokes, though.
Oh, really? Is there a character?
That's the main... He's the guy in the orange jumpsuit in the first movie.
Okay, I watched that movie so long ago.
He's very popular online, is the thing. Yes. He's got, like... He came before him, but he's had more of a Onceler popularity resurgence in recent years, from what I've gathered. He's very funny in the movie, but he's also not probably what you're looking for to evoke.
I want to look at my list of stock names for NPCs.
If it wasn't for that, I would say Vector is a good one.
Oh, Pascal.
Oh, that's
Pascal's
good.
Triangle. Tessellation.
Ooh.
Tess for short.
Tessellation, Tess for short.
Yeah. Yeah, there's some good names. Anyway, back to Gregor the book. Enough about mice names. Howard gives Boots the job of singing Cartesian to sleep, and one of the songs she sings is the one about the queen and the nibblers pouring tea.
Very morbid in retrospect.
Right, but I also think that this is a really clever way to, like, insert the lyrics again in, like, a way that doesn't, like, it's not super obvious, because she also does the bat, come under my hat song, I think.
Which is a red herring of sorts. Well,
right.
It's a real nursery rhyme.
Right, exactly. And we just assume that because they're both in the text again, it's like, oh, it's just Boots singing her songs. And so we don't think that there's anything weird about it. Like, I think that if Suzanne Collins had not included Boots also singing Bat Bat, we would have been like, why is she putting the lyrics in here again?
Why does this keep cropping up? It's almost like it's going to be important.
Right. And, like, I don't know if me as a kid, I would have picked up on that, but I think it's smart the way that she's finding a way to bring back this knowledge to remind us of the lyrics, so when it finally becomes relevant, like, we are primed for that, like, we know the song by now. Howard praises Boots for her excellent work in singing Cartesian to sleep, so she goes around trying to sing everyone to sleep. Half of them are so tired they really do fall asleep, and the other half pretend until Boots herself dozes off.
She's very satisfied with her work.
Yes. Yeah, she's proud of the work that she's done. And I think it's so cute that everyone just plays along. Yeah. Like, that she either succeeds in her job of singing them to sleep, or
she thinks she succeeds.
Yes, and everyone is just like, oh, well, we should give Boots this. She's been through a lot lately. After everyone else is asleep, the older members of the party discuss the Nibbler situation. Gregor knows Luxa is going to keep following the Nibbler's trail even after they get out of Hades Hall. Howard says they have to return home with the injured, and besides, now that they have Cartesian as a witness, they can convince the council to take action.
They haven't, like, done a thorough examination of what Cartesian is, what's ailing him, have they, at this point? Like, they know he's obviously in bad shape, and they're trying to take care of him, but they don't know, like, specifically.
The book goes into detail, like, he has a broken, like, claw or something, and he's really dehydrated and, like, starving. I forget exactly, I didn't take, like, specific notes about it, but the book does go into, like, his specific injuries. I'm not sure that the book ever explains why aside from just, like, trauma and dehydration, he is very out of it for the rest of this book. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I'm not sure if they ever discussed that exactly.
I'm just curious, because I don't remember. Usually when I was reading, I lumped in this attack with the later attack, where we like see it happening in real time. And so we know how the mice die there.
Right. Luxa insists that she will stay on the Nibbler's trail, and Gregor mentions the oath she made. Howard figures out what this means right away, calling it the vow to the dead. He asks her what she's done, and points out she doesn't yet have the Regalian army at her command to fulfill the vow. Luxa thinks if she goes after the Nibblers, the council will send the army after her, especially because of the vow. Gregor asks how the Regalians would even know about the vow, and Photos Gloglo points out that a whole bunch of creatures in Hades Hall heard her and are probably spreading word to the whole Underland. Gregor asks if Luxa's oath even counts since she's only 12, and Howard says in this case it does. There's no way to take it back, and that leaves only one option. Gregor asks what it is, and the chapter ends with Luxa saying, "I have just declared war on the rats."
When I read this out, I remember the first time. I'm like, wait, I guess I hadn't realized they weren't at war with them before?
Yeah.
Like, it was just a really, really uneasy, like,
yes.
dynamic between them, but they hadn't technically, like, declared anything like that.
Yeah,
like,
they weren't actively at war. They were just, like, enemies.
Yeah, but now it's like, no, this is a full-on, no-holds-barred assault between them
like,
now.
there's actually going to be battles now, not just, like...
small missions
right.
with Gregor endangering himself.
Right. And also they had to ally in the previous book to cure the plague.
Yep.
So that was kind of a little bit in the direction of, like, being allies.
And then it got worse with the Solovet reveal.
Yes, that's true, yeah. But they were not actively at war, yeah. These were 2 very intense chapters.
Very heavy episode
yeah.
to cover, yeah.
And it'll just get heavier as we keep making our way through this book.
Yep.
The gruesomeness in this chapter really gets to me too. Like, it's pretty graphic. I mean, it could be worse, but like...
as we see later.
Yeah, exactly. But just the description of, like, bodies being crushed and stuff, and, like, the mention of the baby mice as well is, like, very unsettling. And that whole scene where they're surrounded by dead mice and Luxa is, like, making her vow, it's just so cinematic to me. I can imagine with perfect clarity this, like, Zap is there with them, and she's just this little bubble of light in this field of dead bodies. And Luxa is kneeling on the ground making her vow, and Gregor is just watching her. It's so good in my mind's eye. It's so beautiful, but it's horrifying. Just a very evocative chapter with them in the field of dead bodies. It's part of the reason I love this book in particular so much. Any last thoughts?
I had forgotten how tense things were between Howard and Luxa in these 2 chapters. Like, they're really pulling at each other's strings.
Yeah. I really love the Howard and Luxa, like, development of their relationship, because in Prophecy of Bane, Luxa really hates Howard.
They're very distant.
And they don't know each other well at all, and Luxa just lumps Howard in with Stella Vett, who is mean. And Howard has to be like, we're not all like Stella Vett. And Howard really has to, like, earn her trust. It's just so interesting the way that Howard is, like, the older cousin, but Luxa is the queen, so she has the power to just, like, make decisions, like start wars, and Howard has to be like, that was bad. That was not a good move.
And then he's hospitalized all of book 3.
Right, exactly.
And she's presumed dead for half of book 3.
Yes, so they're not together.
Yeah.
And now they're finally back together.
And so it would make sense that they're not in sync as much.
Right. But also it's so clear that how much they care about each other.
Right. It's just not smooth sailing yet.
Yeah. I feel like this book has so much good Luxa characterization. Like, her relationship with Howard gets explored. With Gregor gets explored. With Rip Red. We get so many good Luxa moments. The other books also have great Luxa moments, but I feel like this one in particular is just... I don't even know how to describe it. It's just really evocative.
Yeah.
It's very effective writing.
Yes.
Thanks so much for joining me, John.
Thank you for having me, as always.
Yes, it's always a good time. Next week's episode will cover chapters 15 and 16. Find us on Tumblr, Instagram, and YouTube at Return to Regalia, all one word. Thank you for listening, and until next time, fly you high.
Fly you high.